to the Daily Bite. I'm your host, Pastor Steve Andrews.
Today we read from Daniel chapter 2. In the 2nd year of the reign of Nebuchadnezzar, Nebuchadnezzar had dreams. His spirit was troubled, and his sleep left him. Then the king commanded that the magicians, the enchanters, the sorcerers, and the Chaldeans be summoned to tell the king his dreams. So they came in and stood before the king. And the king said to them, I had a dream, and my spirit is troubled to know the dream. Then the Chaldeans said to the king in Aramaic, O king, live forever. Tell your servants the dreams, and we will show you the interpretation. The king answered and said to the Chaldeans, The word from me is firm. If you do not make known to me the dream and its interpretations, you shall be torn limb from limb, and your houses shall be laid in ruins. But if you show the dream and its interpretation, you shall receive from me gifts and rewards and great honor. Therefore show me the dream and its interpretation. They answered a second time and said, Let the king tell his servants the dream, and we will show its interpretation. The king answered and said, I know with certainty that you are trying to gain time, because you see that the word from me is firm. If you do not make the dream known to me, there is but one sentence for you. You have agreed to speak lying and corrupt words before me till the times change. Therefore tell me the dream, and I shall know that you can show me its interpretation. The Chaldeans answered the king and said, There is not a man on earth who can meet the king's demands. For no great and powerful king has asked such a thing of any magician, or enchanter, or Chaldean. The thing that the king asks is difficult, and no one can show it to the king except the gods, whose dwelling is not with flesh. Because of this, the king was very angry and furious, and commanded that all the wise men of Babylon be destroyed. So the decree went out, and the wise men were about to be killed, and they sought Daniel and his companions to kill them. Then Daniel replied with prudence and discretion to Arioch, the captain of the king's guard, who had gone out to kill the wise men of Babylon. He declared to Arioch, the king's captain, Why is the decree of the king so urgent? Then Arioch made the matter known to Daniel, and Daniel went in and requested the king to appoint him a time, that he might show the interpretation to the king. Then Daniel went to his house and made the matter known to Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah his companions, and told them to seek mercy from the God of heaven concerning this mystery, so that Daniel and his companions might not be destroyed with the rest of the wise men of Babylon. Then the mystery was revealed to Daniel in a vision of the night. Then Daniel blessed the God of heaven. Daniel answered and said, Blessed be the name of God forever and ever, to whom belong wisdom and might. He changes times and seasons. He removes kings and sets up kings. He gives wisdom to the wise and knowledge to those who have understanding. He reveals deep and hidden things. He knows what is in the darkness, and the light dwells with him. To you, O God of my fathers, I give thanks and praise, for you have given me wisdom and might, and have now made known to me what we asked of you, for you have made known to us the king's matter. Therefore Daniel went in to Arioch, whom the king had appointed to destroy the wise men of Babylon. He went and said thus to him, Do not destroy the wise men of Babylon. Bring me in before the king, and I will show the king the interpretation. Then Arioch brought in Daniel before the king in haste, and said thus to him, I have found among the exiles from Judah a man who will make known to the king the interpretation. The king declared to Daniel, whose name was Belteshazzar, Are you able to make known to me the dream that I have seen and its interpretation? Daniel answered the king and said, No wise men, enchanters, magicians, or astrologers can show to the king the mystery that the king has asked, but there is a God in heaven who reveals mysteries, and he has made known to King Nebuchadnezzar what will be in the latter days. Your dream and the visions of your head as you lay in bed are these. To you, O king, as you lay in bed came thoughts of what would be after this, and he who reveals mysteries made known to you what is to be. But as for me, this mystery has been revealed to me, not because of any wisdom that I have more than all the living, but in order that the interpretation may be made known to the king, and that you may know the thoughts of your mind. You saw, O king, and behold a great image. This image, mighty and of exceeding brightness, stood before you, and its appearance was frightening. The head of this image was of fine gold, and its chest and arms of silver, its middle and thighs of bronze, its legs of iron, its feet partly of iron, partly of clay. As you looked, a stone was cut out by no human hand, and it struck the image on its feet of iron and clay and broke them in pieces. Then the iron, the clay, the bronze, the silver, and the gold all together were broken in pieces and became like the chaff of the summer threshing floors, and the wind carried them away so that not a trace of them could be found. But the stone that struck the image became a great mountain and filled the whole earth. This was the dream. Now we will tell the king its interpretation. You, O king, the king of kings, to whom the God of heaven has given the kingdom, the power and the might, and the glory, and into whose hand he has given, wherever they dwell, the children of man, the beasts of the field, the birds of the heavens, making you rule over them all. You are the head of gold. Another kingdom inferior to you shall arise after you, and yet a third kingdom of bronze, which shall rule over all the earth. And there shall be a fourth kingdom, strong as iron, because iron breaks to pieces and shatters all things. And like iron that crushes, it shall break and crush all these. And as you saw the feet and toes, partly of potter's clay and partly of iron, it shall be a divided kingdom. But some of the firmness of iron shall be in it, just as you saw iron mixed with the soft clay. And as the toes of the feet were partly iron and partly clay, so the kingdom shall be partly strong and partly brittle. As you saw the iron mixed with soft clay, so they will mix with one another in marriage, but they will not hold together, just as iron does not mix with clay. And in the days of those kings the God of heaven will set up a kingdom that shall never be destroyed, nor shall the kingdom be left to another people. It shall break in pieces all these kingdoms and bring them to an end, and it shall stand forever. Just as you saw that a stone was cut from a mountain by no human hand, and that it broke in pieces the iron, the bronze, the clay, the silver, and the gold, a great God has made known to the king what shall be after this. The dream is certain, and its interpretation sure. Then King Nebuchadnezzar fell upon his face and paid homage to Daniel, and commanded that an offering and incense be offered up to him. The king answered and said to Daniel, Truly your God is God of gods and Lord of kings, and a revealer of mysteries, for you have been able to reveal this mystery. Then the king gave Daniel high honors and many great gifts, and made him ruler over the whole province of Babylon, and chief prefect over all the wise men of Babylon. Daniel made a request to the king, and he appointed Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego over the affairs of the province of Babylon. But Daniel remained at the king's court. This is the word of the Lord. There is so much happening in today's chapter, I don't even know how to organize my thoughts on this one, but let's just work our way through it as best we can. So we're going to start with, again, the timestamp at the start of the chapter, just like we did yesterday. The second year of the reign of Nebuchadnezzar. There's challenges with this. Which year are we talking about here? Are we talking about the second year of Nebuchadnezzar's reign just in general as the Babylonian king? That's an option. Nebuchadnezzar becomes king after the death of his own father, officially, I guess, in 605, which is roughly when this is all happening, or chapter 1 had taken place that we saw yesterday. So that would make this 604, in which case Daniel is still one of those youth who is being educated at the time, which is what is suggested in our study Bible, the Lutheran study Bible that we have. Another option here to consider, though, is what if this is the second year of Nebuchadnezzar's rule over Judah and Jerusalem, as in when he's conquered them already, 587 BC, making this 586. I bring that up because as we go through the text, there's a couple of details that are going to show up that make this difficult to see as Daniel still being one of those youth that is being trained. One of them is going to be that when Arioch brings him before Nebuchadnezzar, Arioch refers to him as a man of Judah rather than a youth of Judah. So we have that. The argument that you have to make then is, well, with chapter 1, when Daniel graduates, I guess you want to say, from his 3-year training program, Nebuchadnezzar lifts him up. He sees how wise he is, as with Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. So why would the king not seem to know Daniel here? And the argument, I would say, as a response to that, is that the king's court is quite large. I mean, look at all the people he summons to him at the start of this chapter. He's summoning anybody and everybody that has wisdom to himself. He fills his courts regularly with lots of people. So Daniel, to take this as 586 BC, is to say that Daniel hasn't yet entered that place of great prominence in the king's court, but that this event is what catapults him into that role, which is what we see occur as you look at the end of the text anyway. So that's a great possibility here of what we're looking at. If we were to see this as Daniel still being in his second year of education, then for him to be brought before the king is out of order. It's prior to the time when he would have been brought to the king, and the king uses this event to lift Daniel up as being head over all the affairs of Babylon. He wouldn't have sent him back into that education training program at that point. So I'm arguing here 586 BC for this text as being the time that this is occurring, the second year of Nebuchadnezzar's reign over the throne of Jerusalem at that point. Now, as mentioned yesterday, the Aramaic language begins in this chapter, starting at verse 4, when the Chaldeans speak. And from this point all the way through the end of chapter 7, we are reading out of Aramaic, which makes my Hebrew translation not all that helpful because I don't know Aramaic. I know a little Hebrew. It's rusty, but I can translate from Hebrew at least. I don't know Aramaic, though, so I'm not able to be too useful there. But as we look at what's actually going on in the text, there's so much as you go through this account. Parallel this. Talk about this one with your children. What matches with Joseph and Pharaoh in Egypt hundreds of years before? That's an account your children probably know better than they know this one. Pharaoh has had a dream. Well, actually, before he does, Joseph has interpreted the dreams of the cupbearer and the baker in prison, and the cupbearer is to relay the dream to Pharaoh that Joseph could do this and get him out of jail. The cupbearer forgets him until Pharaoh has a dream that none of his people can interpret for him, and that's when Joseph comes in. And Joseph isn't the one that can interpret dreams. God is. God makes the dream's interpretation known to Joseph, who then is able to make it known to Pharaoh. Pharaoh then delights in this, raises him up into a position of power. It's almost identical in many ways to what we have in this chapter. The dream is not, by any means, not even close, but we'll come to that dream here in a little bit. What do we think about dreams today? I mean, clearly God has worked through dreams in history and certainly in Scripture. We don't put a lot of stock in them today because the Lord has not promised that He would continue to work in that way. That's not to say He couldn't, but we know that what we have by His Word is enough. Hebrews chapter 1, verses 1 and 2, that in the former days, the days of old, the Lord spoke to His people of old by the prophets, but now in these latter days He has spoken to us by His Son. That's the text that I tend to point to for something like that conversation. So all these people respond to the king's command to interpret his dream with fear and an attempt to bless him. Oh, king, live forever. They don't want him to hurt them, right? That's his position of authority over them. So they say that they will tell him the interpretation. But then he instructs them, verse 5, if they don't make known to him the dream and its interpretation, he will kill them and destroy their homes. Harsh, very harsh. Is that a job you would want? Might be a question you could ask your children. And the answer to that's probably no. I mean, no wonder he needed all those youth from Judah. He needs to keep replenishing his wise men in his country because he's killing them. Anyway, they're going to receive blessing and honor and all kinds of stuff from him if they can interpret it. They ask him to tell them the dream and they'll interpret it for him. That's not what he's offering. They have to tell him the dream first because otherwise he thinks they're just going to lie to him until the times change. In other words, until he forgets about it or until he's killed or dies and somebody else is on the throne, whatever it may be. So instead, tell me the dream, interpret it for me after that. And they rightly suggest that there's no one on earth who can meet the king's demand. No one can show it to the king except the gods, whose dwelling is not with flesh. Ask your kids on this one. Are there multiple gods? The answer to that's no. And even though there's only one God, which is good, is it true that God does not dwell with flesh? Ooh, tabernacle and temple reverse that idea, right? That God is present with his people, his throne in their midst. That was the point of that thing. But also John 1, right? That Jesus is the Word, and that the Word took on flesh and dwelled among us. John 1:14, I think in particular. Isaiah 7, that the child would be named Emmanuel, meaning God with us. O come, Emmanuel. I mean, so much of our theology is that it's not like these guys think. God actually has come to dwell among men. So the king is furious. He orders the wise men executed. I looked, again, Aramaic is not the same as Hebrew, and translation from Aramaic into Greek, I don't know if these are actually magi or if they're just wise men. The Greek Septuagint uses the word for wise, sophos, which is where we get the soph and sophomore, which is actually Greek for a wise fool. So wise men are going to be destroyed. He decrees it. And Daniel and his companions are included in this, which again makes me think that they are no longer in that educational program of chapter 1. Instead, Daniel goes to the captain of the guard, who has the order to do this, and he asks why. The captain has no reason to answer Daniel's question. In fact, it could be considered treason to do so. He's supposed to kill Daniel. But just as he had gained the favor, thanks to the Lord, of the chief eunuch in chapter 1, now he has gained the favor of the captain of the king's guard as well. And the guard answers him. Arioch tells him all that's going on. Daniel agrees to do it. He's going to tell the king the interpretation. So he has Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego pray, as well as the other companions, that the Lord would give mercy in this situation and spare them. And so God does. He reveals everything to Daniel that has been seen and is the interpretation. Now, Daniel's response, verse 20, a wonderful word of praise. I'm not going to dwell on this today, but verse 21, God removes kings and God sets up kings. Do we believe that anymore? Or do we think that just isn't true? In our era today, it's still true. We just don't believe it anymore. God's in control. God reigns. Point of the book, remember, God reigns. Stick with that. He's going to point us to Jesus. So, wonderful praise, and let's point to Jesus. Light dwells with God. Jesus is the light of the world. So God has given him this wisdom. God has made it so he can interpret the dream just as he did for Joseph before. Interestingly, verse 24, Daniel argues, do not destroy the wise men of Babylon. Bring me in before the king. So he's going to interpret the dream not just to save himself and his friends, but to save all the wise men of Babylon. You might see that backfire on him later. But it's an act of mercy and kindness to do this. So he does. He goes in and he makes known rightly. Verse 27 is great. No wise man can reveal this, but there is a God in heaven who reveals mysteries. That mystery word is fun. In the New Testament, that's what the sacraments are. We call them sacraments. Pastors are stewards of the mysteries. God has chosen to make known to you his salvation through water and the word, through body and blood in the Lord's Supper. And these are mysteries. We don't understand how it works. I can't tell you specifically how baptism works. I can tell you what it does because the Lord has revealed what it does. I don't know how Christ's body and blood are present in that bread and wine. I only know that God has said that they are. And it's a mystery, and as a pastor, I am to care for those things and give those things to you. This God reigns, and so he's going to reveal to King Nebuchadnezzar something fantastic. He's going to show Nebuchadnezzar a vision of the end of the world, in a sense. It's not fully apocalyptic, but at the same time it is. Let's come back to that in just a moment. What's the dream? So you've got this idol, an image, that has 4 layers to it. The top layer is gold. That is Nebuchadnezzar himself. It's Babylon. Then you've got the chest and the arms of silver. That's the next kingdom that will come after his. Then you've got a kingdom after that, the bronze. And then you've got a 4th kingdom, which is all a mixture of iron and clay. Iron's strong. Clay is fragile and brittle and can fall apart. Then there's a stone cut out. That stone is Jesus that falls upon this worldly kingdom and destroys it. Right? Carried away. The wind carries it away. Not a trace is left. The stone becomes a great mountain. We worship Jesus, not on this mountain or in Jerusalem, as he tells the Samaritan woman, but we worship Jesus throughout the earth. Neat connection there. So, the vision here has been stated. Now it's being interpreted. Daniel calls Nebuchadnezzar King of Kings. Who would you normally think of as King of Kings? Might be a question for your kids. That's a title we usually give to Jesus, right? God has given Nebuchadnezzar the kingdom and the power and the might. God has given him rule over man and beast and bird. That's Genesis 1 language right there. Genesis 1:28, what man is supposed to do. It's also Romans 13 language that God gives governors authority. Many have tried to suggest who these 4 kingdoms are. Obviously, the first one is Babylon because it's Nebuchadnezzar. Persia replaces Babylon. Greece, under Alexander the Great, will replace Persia, and Rome will eventually replace Greece. Those are 4 possible options. You could find others. The reason that list is nice, well, many have interpreted differently, but the reason that list is nice is because Jesus comes at the time of the Roman Empire, right? And that's what we saw here in the text, that it's during the days of those kings, verse 44, of the mixed kings of iron and clay that aren't that strong. During those days, the God of heaven will bring about the kingdom that will never be destroyed. Kingdom divided against kingdom, Matthew 12, as they won't be able to hold themselves together. Jesus in John chapter 18, before Pilate, saying, "My kingdom is not of this world." Now, this kingdom will not be left to another people because it won't be destroyed. It won't end. It won't come to its close. It will be remembered, although these other kingdoms will not be. They will be wiped. There will not be a trace of them remaining at any point. So, this is paradise. This is the end of time. This is the final judgment where this all comes about, where we won't remember the Roman Empire anymore. Everybody remembers the Roman Empire. Every Christian, not every Christian, many Christians know what the Roman Empire did to the church. But in Christ, all kingdoms of this world are defeated because he has defeated the devil, and he has claimed the kingdom back for himself, for the Father. And in the last day, all governing authority belongs to God. He will judge all those that he has entrusted that authority to in the present day. So, we look forward to that as his people, as Christians. Nebuchadnezzar falls on his face like a man to a king, or like a man before a god. Nebuchadnezzar worships Daniel, commands even an offering be made to Daniel. We don't see Daniel reject that. We might expect that he tries to reject it, though it would also be dangerous to do so, right? Before this king who just threatened to kill everybody. Your God truly is God of gods, Lord of kings, revealer of mysteries. So high praise from Nebuchadnezzar. Daniel's work in the midst of this Babylonian kingdom may indeed bring many people to faith in Yahweh, which is a wonderful thing to consider as we go through the book in the next week or so. So he gives Daniel the high honors. He makes him in charge of many things. Again, the comparison there to what's going on with Joseph in the book of Exodus. So we'll see tomorrow more about Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who are mentioned in the last verse, because tomorrow's text is going to deal with what happens to them.